talking about Starlink, I'm going to segue like a professional onto the topic of Elon Musk, because this is a man who's apparently going to be named in a lawsuit from Imane Khelif. Now, if you don't know, you probably do anyway, but Imane Khelif was the boxer who won gold at the Olympic women's competition. The one who had basically failed a chromosomal blood test under the IBA, which kind of proved that they had, well, not female chromosomes. I don't want to get into discussions of genitalia, but, you know, things down there that it's hard to categorise. And but categorise they did. They put her in the women's competition, and with that particularly extensive reach and defined musculoskeletal frame, they went straight to the top. And apparently the big outcry around this is being considered cyberbullying, and she's launched a lawsuit naming both Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling. Joining me now is Andrew Eborn, who is a barrister, a man who can talk about doom, gloom and the apocalypse with a smile on his face.
Well, you segued from Starlink. I thought that was brilliant. Well done. It's lovely to share a studio with you again. You're looking fantastic and working so hard. 13 days on the trot. It's got to be good. Now, this is outrageous. And what happens, what I love about working with you is you always separate the light from the heat. And what we need to look at is some of the facts on this sort of stuff. It was Voltaire, 330 years ago, born in Paris, and this is where it all was. He's always wrongly quoted when we talk about free speech. He always says, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. They always attribute it to Voltaire. It wasn't him at all. It was taken from a book about the friends of Voltaire to do that. What this is concerning with is the whole about eligibility, as you say, about whether we should have men in women's sport and whether this particular person was a man at all or whether they're a woman. Now, what happened in this particular case is obviously J.K. Rowling, who's been brilliant about defending, absolutely brilliant about defending women's rights, brilliant about making sure that we get a bit of sense about hate speech and things like that. You might remember the original Scottish laws that they brought in. Yeah. And the police said, we're going to prosecute everybody.
Oh, you could go dob someone in at a mushroom farm and things like that. Really weird.
Go and find the fun guys in the mushrooms. Absolutely. Thank you. We're here all week.
Boom, boom.
But absolutely. And there was that nonsense they talked about. We're going to investigate every possible allegation about hate crime, but we won't go and get somebody for shoplifting. So all of that nonsense there. What this concern was exactly that. With various tweets during the Olympics. It was the most diverse Olympics around there. But this particular person, what happened is they won gold. They'd previously been banned because they had both X and Y chromosome, apparently. We haven't got the full results on that. But the IOC themselves, they said, what we'll do is the eligibility criteria is simply based on your passport. And based on the passport, this particular, both Imane Khelif and also Lin Yu-ting,
from Taiwan, right?
From Taiwan, both of them, basically, in their passport, are classified as female. Now, that raises all sorts of questions, but it's not the fault of the athletes. And I think what happens here, it's the fault of the IOC to say, this is what it says in your passport, you're eligible, therefore we'll let you come in.
It's interesting you say that, because I thought, you know, when I said that they shouldn't be in the sport, right? They shouldn't be in that category. It was quite grotesque watching women who had trained their entire lives for that moment being pummeled to a pulp by people with physical dominance for various reasons. And that is the fault of the IOC. But I did think to myself, it's got to be a bit of a rough ride, OK? Being Imane Khelif, brought up in Algeria, which is a hugely socially conservative country, and, you know, wouldn't have been able to say, I am a man and be accepted into society like that, so forced to be brought up as a girl, found a talent with boxing, has equally trained really hard, I don't take that away from Imane, and got all the way to the Olympics. Probably a bit easier for her than other people, given physical advantages. But, you know, that doesn't say they didn't put in the work and they haven't had a rough ride in getting to where they've got to. And so I had some sympathy, and I thought sort of, you know, and these things do sort of unleash a whole load of sociopaths hiding behind the veil of anonymity who say grotesque things. And if I was her, I'd have probably been like, I don't want to commit, just let it go. I'm off. I'm going to go and have a holiday instead, frankly. But why should they? Why should they if they, you know, if the IOC have allowed them to? But this Now, I've started losing sympathy now.
Yes.
I mean, not many women out there are that litigious, can I just say? But I'm now losing sympathy. But the point is, this is mad. The lawyer's saying they're going to go after Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling.
And also Donald Trump, maybe.
And Donald Trump, and the lawyer's sitting in France. You're having a giraffe. That can't even happen,
Having
surely.
they have a giraffe as well. I love it. Bit of Cockney rhyming is good. The reality is this. It's not a civil case, so they're not going after them. What it is, it's a criminal case in French law. They're talking about sort of cyberbullying and that particular stuff. And the laws are different around the world. We have various laws about in here, about harassment and so on and so forth. So the important point is it's a criminal case. What they've said is they've alerted the French authorities, and the French authorities are looking into this, about whether some of those tweets amount to cyberbullying under French law. Now, what that means, you have to work out, well, does French law have jurisdiction? Because if Elon Musk is not there...
extradite Elon Musk from America.
and that's the interesting thing. You summarise it brilliantly, because if they are convicted, then there's a possibility that they could be. But the reality is whether they have jurisdiction about these particular tweets and whether it happens about cyberbullying is really quite complicated as to whether French law would apply anyway. The key to it, however, is that people are absolutely right to call out that men should not be in women's sport. That's an absolutely fair comment to make. The particular circumstances of this are a bit more blurred because obviously, as you rightly say, there's no trans issues here is what they say. They've always been identified as women. But if you go back to the basic tenets about why are different sports categorised in this way, men versus women, there was a reason you made the difference between the sport. A lot of it's to do with physical strength.
Yeah.
So if this XY chromosome, and this is the thing about it, was the reason somebody's a bit stronger, they've got bigger muscle power, they've got bigger upper body strength, they have an advantage which wasn't anticipated when they made the original separation. And that's why you need to look at it.
And in a sport like boxing, out of all sports on this here planet, that is the one where it matters the most, because it ends up in the realm of being physically dangerous to the other competitors. I mean, it's just bonkers, isn't it? And we've been having this debate for way too long now. It's really easy. The XY chromosome thing is the easiest. You know, your gender, the sex you're born in, is stamped on every single cell in your body. Doesn't matter what goes on upstairs or downstairs. It is stamped like a stick of rock saying, "Welcome to Blackpool." It is easy to find out. And I just wouldn't mind if science came back into the room. Now, talking about Elon Musk, it's hilarious, isn't it? You know, everyone's going after Elon Musk right now. Hilarious to see that guy, the Information Commissioner from the EU, go, "Oh, we're going to come after you, Elon. You can't have Donald Trump on your platform." And then the Fiorina von der Leyen had to like step in and go, "Oh, he was just having a bad day and he was going a bit left field. That's not what we think." Because I'm like, you do realise, not only is this the richest man in the world, but the man who invented electric vehicles, which you kind of need for your green agenda, putting all these communication satellites up there, which you kind of need for your rolling out the information era and interconnecting the whole continent. Basically, Elon Musk has invented all the most important things in the 21st century, which is why he's got so much money.
Yes.
And I think to myself, how's he done this? Why is there no Silicon Valley in the EU? Why is it all over there in America? Well, perhaps the EU should look in the blimmin' mirror and actually, instead of focusing on law and legislation and regulation, actually get rid of some of that stuff.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it was an extraordinary letter to Elon Musk just before he did that glorious interview. It was a bromance. It wasn't an interview, really. It was a debate. It was a love fest, wasn't it? And good old Donald Trump. They had 3 hours, most of which were technical problems beforehand, and then 2 hours of this solid stuff. My favourite quote in the whole thing, however, was Donald Trump saying that illegal immigration saved my life. Which is what he said. He did say, that was his quote, "Illegal immigration saved my life," because when he was talking about the assassination attempt, he said the reason he looked down was to look at the slide that he was going to do to talk about illegal immigration.
Yeah, of course he did.
And so that was the reason that he looked down. And so that glorious moment, so that was the quote, which nobody picked up on, apart from your brilliant show. But you're right. And Elon, front and centre, he always talks about freedom of speech, but it's freedom of speech, not freedom from consequences. So we need to look at that sort of side, but separate the difference between harmful content and stuff which is deliberately there to incite riots or cause violence. That's wrong. When you're talking about stuff, we should talk about the fundamental tenets of democracy, is we've got to call certain things out. Men in women's sport is wrong. It should be okay to call that out.
It really should. And, you know, it makes me laugh, you know, the left wing salivating, wanting to go after Elon right now. I don't think that man is a natural right-winger, actually. I think back in the day he was probably a Dem.
Oh, he's hilarious.
But he's now been radicalised so much by the left wing that he's like, screw do you?
Oh, but he's brilliant, and his dad's also brilliant. I came on James' show, and James Wales' show quite often as well, and we had his dad on, who's a brilliant character as well.
Oh, no.
No, fantastic. You can get
I want Elon Musk's dad.
No, we'll get Elon Musk in. Your production team are the best in the world. They'll get it sorted. They'll get Elon. Tell him we're on as well. We'll tell him I'm a musketeer. So I love that. I thank you. I'm the only one who uses it. He's got
I want Elon's dad tomorrow.
We'll come in. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the real things in the world. And actually, if you put a positive spin on it, with a bit of humour and stuff like that, we could fix so many things. And what I loved about the bromance, and it was a bromance, what I loved about, they talked about things like deficit, and they talked about this is how you can do this sort of stuff, this is how we can tackle immigration, but in a reasonable and humane way, and talk about things. You know, people entitled to come, let them come legally. If they're not entitled to come, then we've got to work out a sensible way of dealing with it. You talk about defence, you talk about overspending in government and those sort of things. Elon's going to get in a position in Trump's government, is what they're saying.
But the problem I've noticed throughout the West, it doesn't matter what people vote for. If it's right-wing, they're not allowed to have it. So let's just see how those American elections go. Andrew Eborn, it's so good having you in the studio.
Being back with you. I love it.
Honestly, you're like a sort of, shot of whiskey or something. It puts me right up.
A whole distillery. It's got to be
a whole distillery. I'm going to fill my boots with more of you again.